All right, all right. Welcome back. We had a little break there, but we're going to jump right back into it because we're really getting into lot of good conversations. Want to make sure you guys don't miss it. We were talking about faith and spirituality. We're here with Pastor Dare. He's going to tell us some of the effects of the pandemic on our spirituality. We're going to talk about people's faith. Whether you're a believer or not believer, you know someone that is a believer, and that takes a toll on us as well. I mean, it has a lot to do with our personal health. So, Pastor Dare, how has people's belief systems been affected by the pandemic, and what is your take on it from a spiritual perspective?
Thank you so much, Steve, for having me on the show, and thank you, everybody. It's great to be part of this panel, and I really appreciate everybody that you brought up. Big issue for me in the sense that in 2019, God was moving me to write some books. And He was telling me, I want you to warn leaders all over the world. And I'm like, who am I to warn leaders all over the world? And He said, just write what I ask you to write. And I said, okay, if it's something fun, I want to write it.
Yeah.
But you're telling me warn people. And He explained to me that warning is a part of love. When you see something destructive coming, you warn people and tell them this is a way around it.
Yeah.
And that is actual love. It's unfortunately, most people, when we hear warnings, we almost want to shut down. We feel somebody is trying to talk down on us. Somebody is trying to belittle us. Somebody is trying to say, you don't know as much as I do. And I told God, I really didn't want leaders all over the world. And He said, you do what I ask you to do. And I said, well, I'm used to people not listening to me. Even my own, I'm sorry, but my own kids,
Yeah.
It's been a very painful process. My first son, when he was in first grade, I picked him up from school, and he was so young then. I picked him up from school, and we were waiting for his younger brother to be done, and we swung by his school again, and he said, Daddy, I want to play in the playground. I said, okay, so we're waiting for your brother, why not? Mm-hmm. So we got there, and he was about to get I got like a flash, seeing that he was going to fall, and I said, hold on, wait, don't jump. That he was going to fall, mm-hmm. And I warned him, and I heard the voice of God say, just you warned him, now leave him, he will learn. And it was very painful for me to watch him jump and then fall all the way down and land on his head. That was very painful. I'm like, okay, God, I warned him, he did. Well, that's one of the processes where I've gotten used to when God tells me warn people, people don't listen. So I wrote G20 and so on like that. The first one was in July in 2019, and the second one was in November 2019. And God, just told me, warn people, judgment is coming, mm-hmm. And it will start from the church. Now, people don't like to listen. The ones that are most difficult to talk to are spiritual leaders. They're like, who are you? Yeah. I mean, so I wrote it, and I made it available, and God told me there was going to be a lot of deaths. And I said, I don't like the sound of that. Well, you say you don't like it, but it's going to happen. So warn people. And what can people do it's about how people treat one another.
Yeah.
You know, treat people well. You mentioned that businesses are going to bounce back, and yes, that's what we want. But that some of the prices may go beyond pre-COVID. Now that's a little bit of capitalism, and that's not you, that's businesses generally. You know, everybody trying to get back what they lost, and before you know it, you want to overcharge, and before you know it, the system crashes again. So it's important to learn how we treat one another, especially those that, like you said, you know, are so little, nobody wants to look at them, nobody wants to help them.
Yeah.
And, you know, you mentioned the way it affects people's minds.
Yeah.
I just published a subsequent book 2 months ago, and it's titled, you know, it's the third book in the Big Boss series, titled Mental Wellness in Leadership and Management. Because again, God told me this is going to be the after effect.
Yeah.
So many people's minds are going to be affected, but how can they handle it? What can they do? I put all those there. You know, I think I got about almost 1,500 books.
Okay.
And I brought them, you know, the 31st of the year for people to get these books, and this is a warning to the whole world.
Yeah.
And I almost cried. People walked by and nobody came around. And God said, you've done your part.
Yeah.
You've done your part.
Yeah.
Your part as a watchman is you write and you warn.
Yeah.
And you leave things alone.
And don't you think that people's personal relationship with God and prayer is something that really kind of takes that next step forward? Do you think that people are more prayerful now with the pandemic or less? Like how has that changed people's, in your perspective, how has that changed them?
Thank you for that. Now, the painful thing again is that we quickly forget. As soon as we get a little respite, human beings quickly forget. And we want to move back to the way things were.
Yeah.
Let me give you an example. Once we had the lockdown in 2020, you know, in March, this was some of the ads that were going on TV. Oh, we're in this together. Oh, we love one another, and so on like that. And I remember there's this particular one where this restaurant guy was saying, oh, now when we say thank you to those that deliver food, we mean it. So my son was like, oh, so you didn't mean it before? It's quite funny. So and I said, you know, from the bottom of our heart, we mean it, and so on like that. And as soon as the 2-week to 4-week lockdown was over, you know, people came back with almost a vengeance. That's when we had the George Floyd incident. That's when we had a lot of, it's like, what people used to do before, since they couldn't do it, they came back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot 100 to 200,000 people were going to lose their lives in the U.S. We're way past that now.
Yeah.
We're at almost 550,000. And people seem to quickly forget. Now, about 10% have been vaccinated, and then it's like everyone is being thrown out. Oh, no mask anymore, just do what. So when leaders get vaccinated and then they don't care about everybody else and they say, okay, open up everything. Now, it's good to open up things, but still put in place caution.
Yeah.
Let people wear their masks. Let people still social distance. It doesn't say that you shouldn't open up the whole place. But, you know, feel for the people.
Yeah.
Feel for them. You know, so that's what I would say. And it's a personal thing. I will tell you, don't so much depend on, oh, my family is a believing family. I go to a church that believes. No, you got to walk with God yourself.
Yeah.
Walk personally with Him.
Yeah.
And that's very key.
As they say, God helps those who help themselves. You know, it's very important. I know in you know, my family, we haven't been able to go to church as much. We watch it on YouTube and live streaming. So you know, keeping that connection with God and being as prayerful as you know, most families are, can be difficult for a lot of people. But, you know, and also what you were saying with the community, you know, coming together and being able to work together to bring themselves back to where they need to be. And you know, having that prayerful aspect and that connection with God, but also, you know, kind of doing a little bit of hard work and making sure that they're working towards bringing themselves back. I think that's definitely important. And speaking of, you know, the community and everything, I want to go to our next topic, which we're going to talk to Ms. Constance. She's going to talk about community service and as well as medical insurance. So nonprofits have been community saviors, you know, for lack of a better word. Nonprofits have been doing a lot of great work in the community. We've seen a lot of food drives, PPE drives, COVID testing, water for when we had the winter storm about 2-3 weeks ago. So efforts to help the community is at an all-time high, which is great. It's a great sign of society flourishing. It's a great sign of community coming together. And we have a very big expert that I also work with in the same organization, the American Caribbean Chamber of Commerce. We're going to get into more details about that as well. But I want to ask, how has the pandemic affected community service outreach as well as, you know, medical insurance claims? You know, we have a lot of people getting sick and, of course, a lot of people catching COVID-19. So what are your perspectives on both of those things?
Great question, Steve, and thank you again to the listening audience, Facebook Live, all of these beautiful experts in their own right that's on the stage. I really appreciate that. So to answer your question, going towards I'm start with community outreach first, because as you mentioned, one of my positions with the Chamber is to oversee the community outreach. And I know personally, because of the direct involvement, of course, with an entire team, to actually do those food drives, which we now implement once a month, and prior to COVID, when we were somewhat on the lockdown, and we at the Chamber were trying to figure out what can we do, because believe it or not, the calls never stopped coming. The calls were consistently coming in. You know, where can we get food? Where can we get water? How will my bills be paid, etc. So we as a nonprofit, as the Chamber, as it relates to that part of community service, we then put our heads together and say, you know what? We're going to have to connect with the food bank and elected officials and try and implement as many food distribution drives as possible. So that's what we did, you know, working with a great team. And I'm going to tell you, it was pretty much a lifesaver where certain families and communities were concerned.
Absolutely.
And next thing you know, we had elected officials coming to us and asking us, hey, I want to partner with your chamber and let's do a food drive. I see what you guys are doing, because the Chamber, that's who they are. They are a working machine. So with that being said, the community in that aspect, it was very much a needed service that was not being given across the board. Then you fast forward to their own, how am I going to pay my bills? And you're trying to secure and solidify certain resources through your local government administration, you know, on that level, to try and help on that. And then next thing you know, now you're hearing people are being evicted. And so you're getting calls, can you help us pay our rent? So us as a chamber, while we are a business entity, we realized very early on and very quickly, we were actually becoming that community go-to for pretty much everything. You're essential, the basic essentials.
Absolutely.
And it was nothing wrong with that. You know, the members, we got to know several people that we otherwise would not have known by doing the school drives. And just the food drives and everything else that went with it.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think that the in the community, just know that that service is needed, is warranted, and it needs to happen a little bit more, and not just, I'm a firm believer, no, it's okay for different people to engage in helping with the community, but sometimes you have to also realize you don't want it to become the status quo of a photo op.
Yeah.
Okay, because, sometimes that can convolute the entire message of what the reason is, why you're doing the food drive, why are you helping certain individuals, certain communities, and because the need is there, and it's not so much on the medical claims. And one thing I do want to bring to everyone's attention, and I'm quite sure everyone on the panel, as well as the listening audience, is very much in tune to how sad it was during the core of the pandemic when you had certain loved ones admitted to the hospital. To me, that was one of the worst. You were not allowed visitors. You had to basically stay in your parking lot. And I'm speaking from personal experience from people that I personally knew that got sick with the COVID, was admitted in the hospital. And I mean, absolutely not even your immediate spouse. No one was allowed. And then you think about our seniors. They got sick. And they basically had to become isolated.
Yeah.
So that's where that mental health that you've mentioned and other panelists have mentioned about the mental health. That's a big part of that health care.
Absolutely.
Because what I have found, not only during this entire crisis with the pandemic, mental health was almost the worst and at the most high. Because you had the people that were staying at home more. You had the domestic violence, which I'm quite sure Jamie will speak more on and elaborate. But the mere fact, our kids, what did the mental health do to our children?
Yep.
As far as not being able to interact with other school-age children. You're now at home, secluded, and you're having to do your work via Zoom. No interaction with the exception of your internal family.
Yeah.
So I look at this pandemic, healthcare, it divulged a lot of things that was already there, such as, and I have to be very frank with this, because of my healthcare background. I'm not a nurse and nor am I a doctor, but because of the statistics and the divulge what was already there all along, and that was the healthcare disparities that was brought to light with this pandemic in our Black and brown community. The lack of access to healthcare, the morbidities that they already had, it excelled at an all-time high because of the pandemic. So with this pandemic, while yes, we lost a lot of loved ones, and there were a lot of things that happened, but this pandemic also did some other things. It brought some ugly facts that we already knew was there, but it also exposed it and put it on Front Street. And we didn't have no other choice but to address it. And healthcare disparities was one of them. And I'm so glad that now vaccines and the COVID-19 is now being distributed and being done in all communities. Because initially when the vaccines came in, it was like, oh, you had to fit in a certain group. Again, I had an issue with that. Why shouldn't it be open to everyone? What makes you different where you can get the vaccine and then this particular person can't? Again, it made me kind of feel like you're going on social economic level. And if you're not at this level, you're not going to be first in that group of being able to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
So with that, no certain group. You're not in A. You're not in B. With what we had going on, it should have been open to everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that they are in the process of doing that. I just feel that going forward, we as a nation, as a community, we have to rethink and refocus our thinking from healthcare, finances, community outreach, education, all of it.
Absolutely.
That's my personal thoughts.
Absolutely.
So with that being the insurance companies took a hit just like small businesses.
They did.
Because with your COVID-19 testing, they couldn't exclude certain people if you didn't have insurance. Again, one of the disparities that was brought to light. You have all of these uninsured people, and then you have the insurance companies, they're wanting to backdoor and charge, and it should have been free because look what we're in. We're in a state of pandemic, just like the title of this panelist discussion.
That's right.
So with that, the insurance companies took a hit.
Yeah.
So now you're going to see they're going to circle back, and people, the claims, you may start getting bills in the mail. You went getting tested, getting vaccine, and they're telling you, but they find out you have insurance. Then that's a whole nother set of issues because the insurance companies want to stay afloat as well.
Of course.
And we need them. It's not that we don't. It's a business, but they took a hit as well.
Yeah.
But I see that there will be an influx of so now that we're beginning to open up. Just look for that. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the one thing. The saying is that only two things are certain in life: death and taxes. And to me, it's like bills are always going to be there. You're always going to have to pay them, and medical bills are no different than that. So. Just part of that getting back to normal type of thing.
It is, and I'm so glad that you're having this discussion with such a diverse within their own skill set and what they deal with and what their thoughts are as it relates to the pandemic with the schooling. That right there played a major role. Then you have the healthcare part, the spiritual. The businesses, the small businesses, healthcare, with that, going back to the mental health. The mental health, from what I understand, and I was about what you guys are doing to ensure that each student, that is very important because the parents, they are lacking in that area as well. And that mental health is important. So with that, I'm hoping that from this, one of the things we learned is that mental health, we need to reach out to everyone.
Absolutely.
And try to get that on board.
And one of those communities that are affected by mental health is young people as well. So we want to move into our next topic, but before we do, we want to just talk a little bit about how the pandemic has been hitting our youth, and that's one of the segues I wanted to make because we've talked about schools and how things are going with schools and how people are learning now. It's a lot different. They're at home, but for a little bit of older, people that, post high school, college, a little bit after college, 20s and 30s, this has hit, I'm in that category, just to age myself. But, you know, we want to discuss a little bit how the pandemic has hit them as well. So I have my friend Adam here, Adam Sanchez, to talk about that. So Adam, being in the same age group, how has the pandemic affected, you know, us, and what have been some of the adaptations, and, you know, have we been doing a lot of side hustles like you know Ash was saying, and just what are some of those things that have happened?
Well, I'd like to thank you and all these esteemed colleagues of mine that, you know, these are community leaders just like yourself and everybody up here. We've probably seen each other helping out different communities, even if it wasn't our own. We're out in the community getting it. And I like to, you know, when we're not working. When we can relax. Like you said, the 20s, the 30s, the post high school.
Yep.
And you probably remember this. Trustee Ash could remember that. In 2008, we were going to get some work. We're going to start making money, and then the stock market. And you're like, okay. And then pandemic happened, and there's similarities right there that I think we were able to adapt. You know, everybody might not have a 9 to 5, but you're good at something. And this was the time when you were locked down, you were able to, you know, you had a little time on your hands, and maybe at some it was out of necessity because you had to make that money, you know, and bills don't stop, you know, you still got to take care of yourself. And for young people, I feel like it was moving forward, adapting, and, you know, thinking outside the box. And just like Trustee Ash said, that the little monitor, that, you know, that was somebody that was just putting stuff together, and then it just became his 9 to 5 or his permanent work. And, you know, I don't want to say that the pandemic was good, but I think there's a silver lining in everything.
Absolutely.
That, you know, you have to take the good with the bad.
Definitely.
You know, we feel for everybody that lost their lives. To be essential, if you will. I worked for the city of Missouri City. We kept working every day, you know, because we have to keep the city moving, going forward. I was lucky enough to have health care that if I rapid COVID testing, you know, make sure I was all right, but there's young people didn't have that cachet already, that job that was, you know, secure, and, you know, that was across all age groups, that we didn't have that. Not everybody had that stability. And I think the healthcare tied to your job really came up to the forefront, saying like, well, if you have a job, you'll have healthcare. But when stuff like this happens, nobody foresaw it. You're like, okay, now I don't have a job and I don't have health care during a pandemic, and that kind of like, you know, especially during a presidential year, the young people really got engaged because it was Medicare for All was on the ballot. Whether it was, you know, immigration was on the ballot. There were so many things that touched young people. Social justice, like Pastor said about George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, were brought to the forefront, and it got the young people engaged. It got them registered to vote. It got them, you know. Positive coming out of a negative. So, you know, young people are going to, well, the 20s and 30s, you know, I'm 32, I just turned 32. I know I look like I'm in my 20s, but, you know, but
I get that too, Adam. So don't even worry.
But it's that we've been through so many, I wouldn't say traumatic, but we've been through so many world events. I think there's a meme that says, I'm tired of being part of one of we have to focus on the mental health, because we grew up in the Instagram age where likes were, you know, connected to people's self-esteem, and as wrong as that is, it still affects young people. That you see somebody that, you know, maybe has a wad of cash that you're like, well, I'm barely eating, I have to go through these food donations to eat, and that brings your self-esteem down. And it's a trickle-down effect, whether you're a young parent or somebody that's working that might get laid off. You don't know. That stability's not there, so it messes with your mental health, and it may go down to your spouse, the kids, and then it goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we need to address. There's things that we have addressed, like the food shortages, the medical, the healthcare deserts. That if you don't have health insurance, where do you go?
Yeah.
Not everybody can just drive down to the medical center, which is right down the street, but it may not be right down the street to everybody.
Yep.
And it's very, we have to adapt and make sure that everybody's taken care of and educating the public to be like, well, we learned from this. This is the steps we should take.
Yeah.
So you can, the old saying, you don't give a man a fish, you teach him how to fish. And it's like that moving forward that makes society more progressive in a way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, adaptation is the biggest thing that I think that the youth have had to learn and change and just make their own way and figure out ways to do certain things that they've taken for granted, with this pandemic. So that's really a big thing that they I think that is what the young people have had to change is okay, I have to learn to be adaptive. I have to make a plan B. I have to make a plan C, D, E, F, G. I can't just rely on, my 9 to 5, or I can't just rely on the fact that, my parents might have me on their health care or their car insurance. That's not forever. I need to make a different way for myself so that if something like this happens again, I know exactly what to do and I'm okay. So, but yeah, no, absolutely. And that kind of leads me to our last topic, which still kind of ties in the youth a little bit. We're going to now talk about family law. As you've heard from a couple of people, that one of the biggest issues with the pandemic was that family violence has increased, unfortunately. Whether it be because everyone's cooped up in the home and they're not able to have that outlet to go and do the things that they love, stress with finances, stress with, maybe having a lack of relationship with God. Their business is not doing well. The kids are home from school and driving. A lot of things kind of contribute to why, family violence happens. But I know, from personal experience that, from practicing family law, that there are quite a bit more issues in the home than there are usually. And I think Ms. Jamie Jordan can speak to that a little bit more. So, Jamie, how, in your experience in your field of practicing family law, how have you seen kind of the uptick in issues and not just divorce, but child custody, child support, CPS cases? How has that been since the pandemic has started?
Right. First and foremost, thanks, Steve, for having me here. I appreciate that. And
Absolutely.
I'm honored to be amongst you guys. I'm a great group of people, both here on the stage and off the stage, of what you guys do in the community, and I appreciate that. And Steve's a good guy, really good guy, so I'm really glad to be here. So I practice family law, and I've seen since we're kind of, if you guys can recall the day that you heard about COVID, it's kind of like when the Challenger exploded. If you remember where you were standing in your living room, or if, when the towers were struck, I mean, you knew exactly where you were at. So I recall the exact place I was standing when I heard the word COVID. Yeah. And from then on, our lives changed. Yep. Every bit of our lives changed. Whether we had resources or we did not have resources, our lives changed in some aspect. Yep. And in family law, what I've seen is I've seen an upswing in family violence cases, domestic violence, and you say the why. There's a lot of whys, right? There's a lot of whys depending on that particular individual on both sides, whether it be the aggressor or not the aggressor, right? And so we need to focus, I think, more on the how. How do we help? Not only the person that's aggressive, that is the aggressive in the relationship, the aggressor in the relationship, but how do we help the victims? How do we help the complaining witnesses? and those people try to recover from that or try to move on from that. So I've had several clients come in, or even several people come in and just talk to me about family violence and about being in situations and not having the resources to get out.
Yeah.
You know, you have moms who've been stay-at-home moms for years, haven't had a job because that they have raised their kids. That's their job, and that's the most important job any person can have is raising kids. And so they just don't have the resources to get out. And so it's the how. And I know you talk about community, what our community can do, and those community resources.
Yeah.
One of the things is working a lot on having resources in place for those that are coming from domestic violence, or even, and I'm not just talking about the victims of domestic violence, I'm talking about those people that are the aggressors as well, because they came from a background that probably wasn't very good, that took them down this road where this is how they respond to situations. So for both sides, for having resources for people out there, mental issues have been a big thing that I've seen. There's a lot of depression and there's a lot of anxiety, and I see that both sides. It crosses both genders, and I'm going to tell you, COVID was not biased. COVID struck every socioeconomic class that we have. Just like domestic violence, it's not biased. It's going to cross both genders. It's going to cross all classes. And so, I see that with all people, educated people, not educated people. And so with family law, what I've noticed as well is that since, with small businesses, they don't have the resources there, and they may be in a relationship that's not working anymore, and they want to move forward and go ahead and file for divorce, is that they just don't have the resources there to do that. And so with family law cases, we've noticed, at least I've noticed, that there's a decrease in we call deposits or retainers. There's a decrease, but there's attorneys like Steve and I that are willing to work with families and say, I'm not in it for the business or for the money. It's my business, but I'm not in it. I got to pay my bills. We got bills to pay, and I've got 5 kids, so I've got bills to pay. So it's like we've got bills to pay, but we also are in it to say, okay, I understand that you can't pay this deposit, but let's lower my hourly rate and let's work off of this. And I need you to get you to where you need to be. And so, and I know that Steve's like that as well. So we can reach out and help families that way. But I've noticed with COVID, it's just that we've gone from having, how you have a spot you always park in when you go to a parking lot. Like when you go to HEB, you always park in that spot, and you're like, where did I park if I didn't park in that spot? But like we have a routine as human beings. We have this routine that we do our weeks the same, and kind of everything the same way. But when COVID hit, you just threw routine out the door. Right? We turned. Schools went to online, and I was like, I'm like, where's the bus? The bus is not coming.
The bus doesn't come around anymore.
I'm going to tell you one of the best days of my life was when that bus came down the road.
I think it's like the parents' ice cream man.
So, I mean, there's a lot of different aspects that we've seen, like with schools going online and how parents are going to juggle that with moms and dads that were both working. What do they do when they have their child online, and how do they juggle that? And so there was a lot of that just trying to do that. And you've got the stresses. I mean, life was stressful before COVID hit, and then you stuck COVID in, and then you put that freeze, and then we're like, but here's what I'm going to tell all of you guys is that what I've noticed about us as people, no matter what, I think we're all resilient. I think we really are all resilient, because if you think about the punches that we have gotten, just over time, like, oh, my job's not working out. Oh, the kids are driving me crazy. Oh, this is going. And you just go, okay, I'm surviving because of maybe my faith, or whatever that may be, but I'm surviving, and we're resilient. We're all resilient at the end of the day. So I think COVID's going to make us these like superheroes. I really believe that. Because it's all making us better people. Like I'm understanding the issues with accessibility to healthcare. It's like, why don't we have that? It is 2021. And it's like, why don't we have accessibility for everybody to healthcare? We have the facilities. We have the people that are trained to do it. So it's like being more compassionate about what's going on with everybody, because now we get to see it. And now somebody who had a great job may have lost that job and now goes, oh crap, now I'm in, or can I say that?
No, that's fine.
So we just see just a lot of issues, but I think at the end of the day, guys, that people are we're all going to be stronger individuals at the end of the day.
Absolutely. No, you're definitely right about that. And in terms of services and reducing price and everything, I wanted to go ahead and let people know that there are legal aid organizations out there. Lone Star Legal Aid is one of them. Houston Volunteer Lawyers is one of them. Omar Welfare Association is another one. There's a lot of nonprofits that have now arisen because of that in order to step up to the plate of meeting that legal need, because there's quite a bit of need out there. And I know a lot of these organizations have a high caseload, but you know, I wanted to let people know that if you come to me or Jamie, you know, if we can't help you, we're going to find someone that can in the realm of family law. So a couple other tidbits, you know, I want to kind of get wrapped up here. We have an event this Saturday that the American Caribbean Chamber of Commerce is putting on. It's a food drive, both in Missouri City and in Arcola. 2 food drives, same, you know, at the same time. So go to wherever you can go. It's from 11 to 2.
11 to 2, and both sites will actually be incorporating not only COVID-19 testing, the most city will also have HIV testing as well. We were blessed enough to partner with the medical team where they will be implementing both, and we're wanting to continue that on.
Good.
Yes.
Good. So definitely check that out. I'm going to put it on my page as well. It's also going to be on the Boss Up Houston page as well. We got a lot of great resources for you. I'm so glad that you guys were able to join us. We have one more announcement though. Miss Jamie, I want to give you the floor to.
So as I said, I'm a family law attorney in Fort Bend County. So I am running for District Court 328. It's a family court here in Fort Bend County for on the 2022 ballot. So
all right. Congratulations. That's really good. And I practiced in that court before, so you know I know that you're up to the task, and you're gonna really bring a lot of good qualifications, you know, to the job. So I definitely wish you luck, and let me know how I can help. Absolutely. So, all right, everybody. As you know, I am Steve OKOROHA. My contact information, you can find me at goodmanmcgill.com. You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Contact number 833-529-9748. If you have any questions about the show, anything you want to know, anything you want to see in this season, I'm bringing you as much good content as much as I can, giving you more information than I did last season. So, and remember, when life gets you down, it's time to lawyer up. We'll see you again next time. Goodbye, everybody.